Many people would describe the new Super Mario Bros. Series as bland, unoriginal, and uninspired, especially compared to other 2D platformers. It was a series that started out on the DS as a revival of the 2D Mario series that kept going, and going, and going, and going. I am one of the many that believe the series overstayed its welcome due to its inability to bring many new ideas to the table with each passing entry. The DS entry was great, splendid even. I would have like 9 kids with this game. It was a great revival of a series that hadn't seen a new entry in 13 years. However, as more and more entries of the new Super series kept releasing, they started to feel pretty derivative. They all blend together and feel too similar. Now, as a kid, I had a blast with every single one of them. Looking back though, I can see why a lot of hardcore Nintendo fans didn't care for them. I think Nintendo should have found ways to evolve the series more or just drop the series after the Wii release. Speaking of which, the installment of the new Super series that I have the most nostalgia for is New Super Mario Bros. Wii. This is a very okay Mario game. It's extremely non-offensive. If it was on the pH scale, I'd give it a 7. I don't know what that means either. Being only the second to release, this was before the series started to feel stale, especially since it was the first 2D Mario to release on a home console in 19 years. I'm 19 years. New Super Mario Bros. Wii is a very okay game to me, and a game I had a blast with as a 6-year-old. So you know the drill, grab your Mountain Dew Voltage, grab your Doritos, and let's talk about the most non-offensive game to ever exist.
New Super Mario Bros. Wii is a tough game, old school tough, so you better bring your butt-stomping A-game, as this will test even the most seasoned platforming veterans.
Difficulty-wise, Super Mario Wii is like the Dark Souls of 2D platformers, just kidding. Nah man, this game's about as hard as me when I'm looking at pictures of men. So yeah, actually it's pretty hard. Despite what the GameSpot review says, this game has been criticized for its lack of difficulty. In my opinion, this is fair. For the majority of the game, you can blast through the levels without too much trouble, especially if you take the pacifist route and just run past all the enemies instead of engaging. Towards the end though, I'd say around World 7, I do think it starts to get more challenging. It's not, I want to paint my ceiling red levels of challenge, but it will probably take you a couple tries to get past some of the levels. If you're really struggling to complete one of the levels, Nintendo added a feature called the Super Guide, which appears after you've died a certain number of times. Basically, you hit this green block right here to summon the little bitch Luigi to complete the level for you. The only problem is, if you use Luigi to beat a level, the level icon will appear red on the world map instead of blue as a constant reminder of why you're still single. The only way to change it to blue is to man up and beat the level yourself. Overall, the game is in fact quite easy, but that was never a problem I had with it. I don't mind when Nintendo has easier games aimed at a younger or more casual audience. It's okay to have variety in your game catalog in terms of difficulty. You have games like Super Mario Galaxy that have a more balanced difficulty that will give you more of a challenge. So why not throw the super casual players a bone and give them something more accessible? The Wii's audience was filled with casual players after all, so it made sense to have a game that could be completed by people that have little to no experience with video games. 2D Mario seemed like a natural choice in terms of creating a super accessible game. Anyway, enough with difficulty. How does this game control? New Super Mario Bros. Wii controls pretty much identically to New Super Mario Bros. On the DS. Wall jump, ground pound, and triple jump are all present here and feel great to use. Nintendo is always great at making their platformers feel satisfying to simply control, and Super Mario Wii is no exception. The controls are so fluid, and you feel like you were always in complete control of Mario, and with his full moveset, it makes it easy to blast through levels once you've mastered it. One move that's brand new to Super Mario Wii is the spin move you can perform while in midair. This is a great addition that gives you a bit more airtime, which makes you feel like you have even more control of Mario. The only problem is that the way you perform this move is by shaking the Wii remote. Force implementation of motion controls infamously plagued games during the Wii generation and dragged down otherwise great experiences. As someone that basically grew up in the Wii generation, I usually didn't mind it as much as others, but I'll still admit it was overdone and many games could have done without it, including this one. Shaking the Wii remote to spin just doesn't feel intuitive at all. It doesn't feel responsive enough, and even when I'm shaking the controller harder than I shake a newborn baby to get it to stop crying, sometimes it just refuses to input. For the most part, the controls are great, but I'm not a huge fan of how you control this game. I don't really like the sideways Wii remote shtick. As a kid, I didn't mind it one bit, but now it's hard to go back to. It's just not comfortable to hold. I've heard some people say, it's great because it's almost like you're holding an NES controller, and I do not agree one bit. The game does offer nunchuck support, and honestly, I think this is the way to go. It's not ideal, but it's a huge step up from the sideways Wii remote in my opinion. It feels much better to use. The game doesn't offer classic controller support, which really stinks because I think it would have been the perfect way to play this. I understand why it's not supported though. Some sections of the game require motion controls, which the classic controllers do not have, which is exactly why we don't force motion controls in our games. The game controls great, feels great, totally recommend the nunchuck. Let's talk power-ups. Power-ups are a staple in the Mario series, and the 2D games in particular have a stronger emphasis on them. Super Mario Wii might be one of my favorites in terms of power-ups. I really like the selection here. Plenty of old favorites return. You got the classic Super Mushroom, Fire Flower, and Superstar. An item returning from the DS game is the Mini Mushroom, which makes Mario comically small and it has a few benefits. The main reason you would get this thing is to access special areas that you wouldn't be able to before, like small pipes. It also gives you the ability to run on water, which is pretty neat, but this power-up is kinda weird to me. It doesn't really feel like a power-up. There aren't really any advantages offensive-wise, and it's only really used for squeezing through tight spaces and stuff. I don't really like playing as Mini Mario. You're super floaty, you can't kill enemies without ground pounding, you still die after one hit. I'm just not very good playing as Mini Mario. I'm worse at being Mini Mario than I was being an emergency hotline operator. Hello, Suicide Hotline, please hold. Whenever I see a Mini Mushroom, instead of thinking, oh sweet, a power-up, I usually end up thinking, oh, I guess I should probably grab that if I want to access certain areas. Super Mario Wii added 3 new power-ups, the Ice Flower, Propeller Mushroom, and the Penguin Suit. The Ice Flower was technically in Super Mario Galaxy, but its functionality is completely different here. In this game, you use it to freeze enemies, and from there you can execute them or use their frozen corpse to kill all their friends. It's also one of the few ways of defeating Dry Bones. The Propeller Mushroom is sort of the headline new item and allows for quick ascension by shaking the Wii Remote, and quick descension by pressing down. You can also choose to fall gently by continuing to shake the Wii Remote. This is one of my favorites. I really like the added air mobility. It makes traversing courses, especially the ones with a lot of pits, a ton of fun. The other new power-up is the Penguin Suit, and this is basically a souped-up version of the Ice Flower, but you'll probably come across it less often. Just like the Ice Flower, it can throw ice balls, but you can also toboggan your way through enemies, swim with more mobility since you don't have to keep mashing the jump button, and it also gives you more traction on ice. Lastly, I don't know if you call this a power-up, but Yoshi returns in this game. You can do all sorts of stuff with him. You can flutter jump, consume enemies, spit them back out, and eat berries to shit out some useful items. Excellent lineup of power-ups here. The Ice Flower and Penguin Suit are a bit derivative, but in general, I think it's an excellent lineup, and I'd say all of them, even the Mini Mushroom to some extent, are fun to use. You can't talk about New Super Mario Bros. Wii without the headlining feature, multiplayer. But not just multiplayer, 4-player multiplayer. This is a feature that Miyamoto has been wanting to add to Mario for a very long time, but apparently couldn't do it until now due to technical limitations. Older 2D Marios had some form of multiplayer, but it was really just swapping turns when the other player dies. Here we can finally play with up to 4 people at the same time, and it is just as chaotic and fun as it sounds. When it's just 2 people playing, it's a pretty chill time. If you work together well enough, it'll make it easier to complete courses. When 3 to 4 people are playing, it's a complete train wreck. It's too cluttered, you're always running into each other, there's always that one asshole that keeps picking you up and throwing you into pits. That's me, I'm that asshole. It's not a practical way of clearing courses, but jumping jellyfish is at a good time. What's supposed to be a cooperative multiplayer mode ends up being totally competitive as you and your friends try to kill each other and reach the flagpole first. There's a ton of screaming, swearing, laughter, and it's simply a jolly good time. New Super Mario Bros. Wii had 9 different worlds that are all themed after some generic biome. All the different worlds are occupied by one of the Koopalings. This is the first time we saw them in the modern era with 3D models, which was really cool at the time, but in retrospect, it's kinda lame that every boss you fight is just a different Koopaling with a different ability. You have Wendy, who shoots rings at you, Bitch Boy McGee over here bounces around on his little ball, Morton gives you the old Discord mod special and uses his body weight to shake the ground and stun you. You fight each of them once at the halfway point through the world in the standard stomp on their head 3 times battle, and at the end of the world, Magikoopa or Kamek or whatever comes in and creates a little twist on the battle. Ooh. Onto the worlds themselves now. The first world is your stock standard Mario World 1, basically a grassy plain area. I really wish they would pick something a little more unique for their starting worlds. It feels like all Mario games start in this sort of area, but whatever. The second world is a desert area, and this also isn't my favorite. I've never been a fan of desert areas in games. They all feel pretty bland to me. Except for the Sand Kingdom in Super Mario Odyssey. That is a phenomenal desert area. Look how good the sand looks. Oh, it's so good. But anyway, terrible world, 0 out of 10. Now we're talking my language. I've grown to really love snowy areas in games. They're always so peaceful and they fill me with a sense of childlike joy as it reminds me of winters as a kid. Phendrana Drifts in Metroid Prime, the starting area in The Last of Us Part 2, Midgard in God of War Ragnarok, Distant Tundra in Pikmin 3. This isn't really a snow level, but do you guys remember that part in Galaxy 2 where you're skating around on that frozen lake and that one song is playing? Oh, good stuff. Excellent world. We're hitting the beach next and it's full of water levels, yay! Why is everything about water levels always great except for the gameplay itself? The atmosphere is great, the music is always fantastic, there's usually a lot of cool enemies to fight, but the levels themselves are usually never fun. I don't like the way most of them control. World 5 is jungle themed, and this is another favorite biome of mine. I love woodland, jungle, foresty areas. One of my all-time favorites might be the Wooded Kingdom in Super Mario Odyssey. This one here, it's alright. It's full of wigglers, so that's always a plus. World 6 is a mountain range, which is kinda neat, I guess. You go high into the sky for World 7, and this one might have some of my favorite level design in the entire game. There's a lot of areas where you can fall to your death because you're in the sky, and that calls for some more precise platforming. Pretty solid world. The last main world is another archetype I don't really care for, and that's the volcanic lava region. These were never all too interesting for me. It makes for a good final area because of how intense it feels, but it's just not an aesthetic that appeals to me. Lastly, there's a 9th world that has 8 special levels that are unlocked when you get all the star coins in the corresponding world. There's not really a cohesive theme here, they're just 8 miscellaneous extra challenging levels that don't have a checkpoint in them for even more challenge. Overall, the 9 worlds in New Super Mario Bros. Wii are kinda shit, to be honest. I mean, they're not horrible, they're all just super generic. This section was mostly just an excuse for me to talk about my favorite environments in other games, because those games actually have interesting environments. Before you say anything, yeah, I know, I'm probably comparing apples to oranges comparing The Last of Us Part 2 to New Super Mario Bros. Wii, but my point still stands. Just because it's a 2D game doesn't excuse how basic everything is. Donkey Kong, Metroid, and Inside all have worlds and environments that just ooze personality. The only worlds in this game I really like, I only like because I like the aesthetic they're going for. It's still just generic forest area and generic snowy area, and that's a pretty good segue to my conclusion on this game. This game as a whole can best be described as generic, bland, and uninspired. The worlds are basic, the music is basic, the level design for the most part is basic. Even judging this game in a vacuum, let's say the rest of the new Super series never existed. Is this really the best they could do with a revival of 2D Mario, one of the most important and influential games to ever exist? It's just so simple, I don't know how else to put it. But despite that, I still have fun with it? Did I want more? Absolutely. But I can't deny that I just have fun with it. It's like junk food gaming. It's not necessarily high quality, but it's just dumb, simple fun. I really like New Super Mario Bros. Wii, flaws and all. It gets a lot of hate, and for good reason. But I think it's pretty okay. And that's it, farewell.